Dr. Freud.
I've always wondered, and I want to ask you now in public, how important Oulipo and particularly some writers like Georges Perec were for you. Because in a way, I recognize in you, in this particular instance, a kind of Perec move.
You make me a strange question, because I met the Oulipo very early in '61, when in a congress I met François Le Lyonnais, Yves Berger. They started telling me about Oulipo, and then I translated Exercice de Style by Queneau. So I was really inside the Oulipo, and I was a good friend of Calvino, and Calvino was concerned with Oulipo, and so on. So I should say the last one I came across was just Perec, and just 2 days ago in Toronto, a friend of mine who has wasted a lot of his time in writing about me told me that he is on the verge of finishing a long essay in which he shows the continuous parallelism between my work and Perec. And so I would say, of the people of Oulipo, Perec was the one who has less influenced me. But it seems that, you know, there are also unconscious influence. You are influenced by books you have read 50 years before. Once one of my friends, after The Name of the Rose, said, but you should have been influenced by Dmitry Merezkovsky. It's like Taksil. Nobody knows any longer who he was. He was a decadent Russian writer between the end of the beginning of the 20th century, wrote historical books on Leonardo, Julian the Apostate, and so I read Merezkovsky at the age of 12. So
you did?
Yes. So probably a certain influence worked, or maybe not, it was my friend. But sometime I discovered to be largely influenced by books I had not read at all.
But I mean, and this probably, in closing, this is...
We have discussed
we have
3 years ago with Bayard.
We had this conversation at the library about 3 years ago. If you haven't read this book, I highly recommend it, or maybe you don't need to read it.
Bayard
who's a
was written a book on the fact that we are speaking continuously and competently of the books we have not read.
So the book is called How to Talk About Books You Haven't Read. And there is a chapter on Umberto Eco, and in my impishness, I believed it would be interesting to bring Umberto Eco together with Pierre Bayard. And I remember the very first line I uttered, you corrected me immediately. I won't make that mistake again. I said, Umberto Eco, who has a library of 30,000 books. And you said, no, 50,000. And this phenomenon...
I am a teacher.
Yeah, and this phenomenon of the books beckoning, nearly what Benjamin talks about when he talks about the sex appeal of the inanimate. This is something you're under the influence greatly when you walk around your library. Describe Umberto Eco walking and looking at his shelves.
No, it gives you the sense of confidence and continuity, not only with your past, but with the universal past. Okay, you feel very confident, saying that all the wisdom you need is there. You couldn't feel the same feeling having a box full of USB. That would be different. The same way in which it can be moving to find in your cellar the edition of Pinocchio you read at the age of 6 with your scribbles, the mark of your thumbs, and if you found the iPad or USB of Pinocchio, you didn't feel any emotion. So it's very beautiful to walk around the corridors of your library. But the typical case is the one in which you have not read the books in your library. That is the majority of the books. Otherwise, why to keep a library only to store the books you have already read? No, you have a library as a place in which you can find every time you need the book to read. And it happens that certain books are looking at you for years and years with a sort of reproach, and you feel embarrassed and ashamed. And finally, after 30 years, you have that book on your shelf, you pick it up, you open it, start reading, and you discover that you knew perfectly what he was saying. Reasons. One is a little occultistic, since I believe I belong to the Skeptical Association against abnormal experiences. But it seems that something passes by the book through your fingers to your brain, and so you absorb a part of the wisdom of the book. The second one is that every time in 30 years you picked up the book, even though only for polishing it or to displace it, to find another book, without realizing it, you open it and you read something. And the third reason, the most scientific, that in those 30 years you have read many other books that were speaking of that one. And so when you open it, you discover. So at a certain moment, you have the impression to have read all of your books, which is false, but it's very consoling.
Thank you very much.